He hasn't said a word in 9 days, and still the alarms trigger every time we pass his door. That line, muttered by a jittery junior officer outside cell 14B, was meant as a joke. But no one laughed. Not anymore. On the first day, they had mocked him. On the third, they tried to make him flinch. On the fifth, someone spit through the bars. By the seventh, one of the guards requested a transfer to another wing. And now, on the ninth, they had simply stopped speaking when near the cell. Silence, somehow, felt like respect. Or fear. They just didn't want to admit it. Lieutenant Zern was the exception. Brash, freshly promoted, and overly proud of his pointed tusks and academy medals, Zern strutted down the corridor holding a snack cube in one hand and a data slab in the other. He stopped just outside the dimly lit prison cell and smirked at the human sitting on the bench inside. Look at him. Pathetic. He doesn't even blink. I bet he's catatonic. Or maybe they sent us a corpse and didn't tell us. The human was tall, but you wouldn't know it from how he sat, head slightly lowered, forearms on his knees, completely still. His skin was weathered, one eye bearing a thin scar that ran vertical from brow to cheekbone. He wore standard Terran combat fatigues, no insignia, no name tag, just gray and black weave armor faded from years of use. No visible injuries. No visible reactions either. That made the aliens uncomfortable. Another guard leaned closer, watching the monitors. No ID, no speech, no movement. Still messing with our door sensors somehow. I don't like it. Zern scoffed and tapped the slab against the cell's energy shield, causing a brief flicker. Boo, he said flatly. The human didn't move. Zern turned to the others with a grin. I'm telling you, it's just a Terran scarecrow. One of their leftover bioprops or something. They probably stuffed him full of bad batteries and aimed him at our morale. The others didn't laugh, but they let the comments slide. They didn't want to appear as if they were afraid of a mute meatbag, even if he gave off the same vibe as a minefield with a doormat on it. The guards returned to their rotation. Zern stayed casually chewing on his snack cube, watching the prisoner with curiosity. You know, he said, pacing in front of the cell, if you're trying to play some Jedi mind trick, it's not working. You're on a Dominion-class cruiser, bound for the tribunal on Drathis 9. You'll be judged, recycled, and vaporized before the week's out. And they won't even let us watch, which is a real shame. I hear humans scream funny. Still no response. Zern leaned in closer, lowering his voice. I bet you weren't even a soldier. Probably a farmer. Or a technician who picked up a rock and got lucky. You got captured with that weird briefcase. Locked tighter than my aunt's mating pod. Won't open for any of our tech. What's in there, Love letters? Secret snacks? A key to Earth's last vending machine? Behind him, another officer called out. Zern, stop poking the exhibit and report to the bridge. They want a security sweep before the jump. Zern gave a two-finger salute and muttered, Enjoy your silence, meatbag. He turned to leave. As he passed the security console, the lights flickered. Just for half a second. The temperature dropped by a degree. The monitor stuttered, and one of the screens rebooted itself. Zern paused and looked back. The human hadn't moved an inch. He rubbed his arms, blaming the ship's spotty power grid, and walked away. The surveillance tech sitting at the console frowned. That's the third time it's happened this week. Only near 14B. His colleague nodded slowly. You think it's him? I think we should stop talking about it. Elsewhere, in the command dome of the Dominion-class warship, Commander Rex was pacing in front of the central holodeble. His claws twitched with agitation as he reviewed the prisoner transfer manifests. Most of the detainees were low-level rebels, defectors, or political troublemakers from outer sectors. Harmless. Temporary. But Cell 14B was flagged as a Class 0 anomaly. No records, no match, just an extraction timestamp from the Earth incident labeled Classified, Terran Black Flag. That classification hadn't been used in 80 years. He turned to his second-in-command. Have we heard anything from the Terran embassy? No response, Radio silence. They haven't even requested a status update. It's like they don't care. Commander Rex narrowed his eyes. Or they're pretending not to. Down in the holding wing, one of the rookie guards made the mistake of leaning too close to the shield grid of 14B. He tapped the field lightly with a stun prod, trying to test it. A tiny spark leapt from the contact point and knocked the prod out of his hand. The lights above him popped. A maintenance droid sparked and dropped from its ceiling rail. The guard stumbled back, face pale. He didn't move, the rookie whispered. I swear he didn't even twitch. Another guard grabbed his arm. Stop playing games. This place messes with your head. Let's go. The human sat alone in the cell, motionless. But his eyes were not blank. They were calculating. Watching. Waiting. No sound escaped his lips. No emotion touched his expression. But in the reflection of the security chem feed, a faint blue shimmer danced over his knuckles, like neural static ready to arc. Later that night, when the ship's artificial sleep cycle dimmed the corridors, the briefcase in the evidence vault pulsed softly. Just once. A near-invisible signal shot from it to the ship's internal comms. Not a hack. A handshake. The system hesitated, then quietly accepted a protocol key it didn't know it had. One phrase lingered in the background log before it scrubbed itself. Protocol shadow confirmed. Override pending. And in cell 14B, the prisoner opened his eyes. Just for a second. Then he closed them again. Not yet. Not while they were still laughing. Not while they still thought he was nothing. They called him a prisoner. But they hadn't yet realized they'd locked the gate from the inside. The arrival of Colonel Vex turned the entire rhythm of the cruiser upside down. Her presence, though officially labeled as a routine inspection, was anything but casual. She moved through the halls with a squad of black armored guards, each bearing the insignia of the Dominion's Internal Affairs Division. Where they walked, officers snapped to attention, and no one dared to ask questions. She was known across multiple sectors as the blade the tribunal used when it needed to make someone disappear quietly. Her record was spotless. Her temper was not. By the time she reached the prison wing, the guards had already begun whispering among themselves. Someone mentioned the human. Someone else laughed nervously. The story was already evolving, guards claiming they saw the human's reflection blink before his face did, or that he never showed up on thermal scans. Most called it nonsense. But none volunteered to walk with the colonel to cell 14B. She stopped at the entrance and stared at the cell. No greeting. No comment. Just silence, her cold black eyes scanning every inch of the human like a predator measuring an unfamiliar prey. The prisoner remained still, seated exactly as before, unfazed by her presence. One of her guards leaned in and whispered, "He hasn't moved since day one. Some think he's in shock. Or maybe a body double. But the tech keeps saying the power grid spikes when he's near." Vex raised an eyebrow. She stepped forward, close enough for the cell's shield to cast a faint shimmer against her armored chest plate. "So," she said with a dry smile, "this is the infamous Terran ghost I've heard about. The silent statue of Sector 6. Her voice was smooth, cold, and surgical. She watched for a flinch. "Nothing. I expected more," she said, her voice rising just a hair. "Earth used to produce decent soldiers. Not silent artifacts." Still no movement. She stared for another beat, then turned to her team. "Bring me the briefcase he was found with." It arrived in moments, carried by 2 armored units who handled it like unstable fuel. The case was matte black, scarred, and strangely weightless. Dominion Tech had failed to open it, scan it, or even identify its contents. No seams, no locks, just one metallic indentation in the shape of a triangle. They had assumed it was ornamental. Vex had other ideas. She placed it on a portable data table in front of the cell and activated a military-grade decryption rig. It whirred, flashed red then blue, then flatlined. Access denied? Protocol mismatch. Attempt logged. Vex frowned and keyed in a manual override. Nothing. The system didn't even recognize her authority. She narrowed her eyes, typed in her full tribunal credentials, and tried again. The screen turned black. A single message appeared in an archaic human dialect. It read, "Access denied. Rank insufficient. Supreme override required." Vex stepped back. One of her guards spoke up. "We've tried everything. Even the AI couldn't breach it. We assumed the case was just some bluff tactic. A psychological anchor." Vex stared at the human again, then at the briefcase. "This case doesn't respond to Dominion authority. Which means one of two things. Either this man is lying about his status, or he outranks everyone on this vessel." That statement caused a ripple of silence so sharp it felt like the air shifted. On the bridge, the captain's attention snapped toward the central console. Red lights blinked across the screen in a language not used in over a century. The ship's AI, programmed only to follow Dominion protocols, suddenly halted its routines. Autonomous doors glitched. Navigation lagged. A low hum echoed through the decks, subtle and irregular. A tech officer tapped at his screen, confused. Something just pinged the core. A handshake signal. But not from outside. From inside the ship. Commander Rex barked. "Source?" The officer hesitated. "Level 5. Detainment block. Cell 14. Rex stood up, his eyes narrowing to slits. "Get me visual." The screen lit up, showing the human sitting still in his cell, same posture, same position. The briefcase beside him glowed faintly, only visible through infrared. But the sensor overlay showed something impossible. A signal loop was being transmitted through the walls, reverberating through the entire ship in bursts of coded frequency. It wasn't data. It was a trigger. And it wasn't broadcasting. It was listening. Back in the prison wing, Vex stood frozen. The briefcase began to emit a soft clicking sound. One of the guards reached for it, but the human finally moved. Just his hand. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted his right index finger and tapped it twice on the metal bench. The clicking stopped. The lights in the hallway dimmed again. This time, they didn't come back up immediately. Vex's face lost all trace of confidence. "He responded," a guard whispered. Vex took a step forward. "Who are you?" she demanded. The human said nothing. "Answer me, or I'll have your mind scanned, atomized, and archived for study." The human slowly lifted his head. His eyes, cold and alive, locked onto hers for the first time. No fear. No hate. Just acknowledgement. Like he was waiting for this exact moment to begin. Vex raised her arm, signaling the mind probe technicians. "Prepare room 9. We're getting answers." As the guards moved to escort him, the lights came back on. But now, the ship's AI system flashed an alert in every corner of the prison wing. Unauthorized override detected. Internal systems compromised. Core subroutine altered. All functions now under contingency protocol. The message flashed in the Dominion's language, then shifted to Terran Standard. One guard backed away. This isn't possible. That system is closed loop. It can't even translate Terran Standard without a patch." Another voice spoke from the hallway speaker, a deep metallic tone with a faint Terran accent. "Awaiting command input. Clearance recognized. Shadow protocol active. Standing by, Commander." The guards froze. Vex turned pale. And the human smiled. Just a fraction of an inch. Then returned to silence. The walk to Interrogation Room 9 was uneventful on the surface, but every step carried the weight of something fraying at the edges of control. The guards flanked the human on all sides, blasters armed, neurocuffs secured around his wrists and ankles. The cuffs weren't standard. They were overkill. Designed for volatile psychics and planetary war criminals. Yet none of the guards protested the assignment. In fact, a few requested backup escorts just for the hallway. Something about the air around the prisoner made the armor feel thin and useless. Like the ship itself knew who it was carrying. The human walked with quiet precision. His boots made no sound on the polished floor. His shoulders didn't hunch or sag like a man being dragged to a mind extraction. He moved as though he'd walked these halls before. As though he was leading them. One of the guards kept glancing at the back of his head, half expecting him to turn around and whisper something like, "I let you live." But he didn't. He said nothing. Inside the chamber, a web of metal arms and neural lines hung from the ceiling like a nest of mechanical snakes. In the center sat the interrogation chair, reclined, reinforced, and wrapped in sensors designed to strip thoughts from the cortex like data from a drive. 3 technicians prepped the machine, one of them muttering under his breath as he checked the override levels. These systems were supposed to be infallible. Yet here they were triple-checking the integrity, as if afraid the prisoner might infect the wires just by proximity. They secured him in the chair. The neural cuffs latched into the console. One by one, the lines connected to his temples, wrists, and spine. The lead tech gave a nod. Colonel Vex stood behind the glass, flanked by Commander Rex and a growing group of high-ranking officers. She spoke into the comm. "Begin probe sequence." The machine hummed to life. Blue light swept over the prisoner's face. Electrodes danced with energy as the first layer of thought mapping began. The AI's voice spoke coldly through the intercom. Initial scan underway. Cortical lock engaged. Memory stream extraction commencing. For 3 seconds, everything seemed normal. Then the hum deepened into a rumble. The blue light began to flicker. The data feed scrolling across the screen stuttered. Symbols rearranged themselves in real time. The AI paused, recalculated, then gave an unexpected message. Inversion spike detected. Subject is not responding. Subject is observing. The technicians froze. Vex leaned closer. "What does that mean?" Before anyone could answer, the screen went black. The neural feed reversed. Power to the chair surged in a violent pulse. Sparks burst from the ceiling rig. One of the techs screamed and collapsed. The others scrambled for manual shutdown. Across the surveillance window, they saw something impossible. The prisoner's eyes were open wide, glowing faintly with a soft, impossible shimmer. Not rage. Not panic. Something colder. Curious. Like a scientist watching a new creature hatch. Emergency locks kicked in, sealing the room. Inside, the 2 remaining technicians were now being bombarded with their own memories. Not images of the prisoner's life, but their own fears. One dropped to his knees, sobbing. The other tried to claw the helmet off his head. The machine pulsed again. The restraints didn't even budge. Vex slammed her fist on the wall panel. "Pull the plug." The AI answered calmly. Unable to comply. "Primary interface has been reassigned." Rex barked, "Override it." The AI responded with a simple phrase. "You are not authorized." Across the bridge and in every system-connected terminal, the ship's OS language shifted. Terran Standard flooded the panels. Every Dominion symbol was overwritten in real time. Firewalls crumbled. Auto-defense systems deactivated. Lights dimmed to emergency power. Inside the chamber, the prisoner slowly lifted his hands. The neural cuffs snapped open like rotten twine. He stood. One of the guards outside whispered something that sounded like a prayer. Another took a step back, reaching for his weapon before thinking better of it. Rex looked at Vex. "This isn't just a human agent. He's integrated." Vex's voice was ice. "He's a systems-class operative. They don't exist anymore. Earth banned them. The technology was wiped after the solar collapse. Neural warfare was too unstable." Rex didn't blink. Apparently someone survived. Inside the room, the prisoner walked toward the main door. It opened for him without a sound. No one had touched the control panel. No one dared. He looked at the assembled officers, his gaze calm, cold, without a trace of fear. Then he spoke for the second time since arriving on the ship. "Release is not necessary. I've already left." That was when the auxiliary lights cut out completely. Every sensor in the room went blind. A warning klaxon screamed once, then died mid-howl. The prisoner vanished from visual. Seconds later, internal scanners triggered in a dozen different places across the ship. Hallways, storage bays, engineering, medical. He was everywhere. Or nowhere. Back in the bridge, chaos reigned. Officers barked orders. Screens rebooted in cycles. Fire suppression systems triggered without heat. The ship's gravity shifted twice, once tilting the entire vessel by 4 degrees. Someone attempted to reboot from the core. The system rejected the command with a new phrase. Shadow confirmed. Integration complete. Stand by for host transfer. Rex turned to Vex. What is he? Vex whispered without turning. He's not a prisoner. He's a protocol. In the distance, a door hissed open. A single figure walked back into view. The same man. Calm. Composed. Not even winded. He looked at the nearest guard and said one word. Proceed. That single word triggered a silent cascade through the cruiser's mainframe. The engines rebooted. The security fields reconfigured. Every turret retracted. Surveillance logs were erased. The ship's destination coordinates changed mid-flight. And as the officers watched in stunned horror, the ship's name on every registry panel was overwritten with a new Terran designation. Dustfall. The prisoner walked past them without pause. The guards stepped aside. No one gave the order. They simply moved, as if some ancient instinct warned them that interfering now would not lead to discipline but annihilation. And still, he said nothing more. No one dared follow. The silence in the command deck was louder than any siren. Commander Rex stood paralyzed, his 3-fingered hand hovering over the comm interface that no longer responded to touch. Every Dominion protocol he tried was met with that same silent rejection. It wasn't that the ship had been taken. It was that the ship no longer considered them relevant. Officers barked orders into dead channels. Navigation displays now showed no destination, only a blinking icon that pulsed in the rhythm of an Earth military distress beacon, except it wasn't a distress signal. It was a summoning pattern. A call. And the Dominion ship was the instrument. Vex finally moved, her eyes locked on the human who had just walked through a sealed doorway without slowing his stride. She followed without hesitation, motioning for a pair of her black armored guards to flank her, but even they hesitated. Fear wasn't supposed to factor into Dominion soldiers. And yet none of them could look directly into the prisoner's face for long. Something about his presence, something underneath his stillness, triggered ancient survival instincts that no amount of training could overwrite. He reached the end of the corridor where the Tactical Operations Core was located. It was sealed, locked by multi-level encryption that required 2 command signatures and retinal scans from bridge officers. He didn't touch the door. He stood in front of it, closed his eyes, and whispered a sound, no language, no code, just a vibration. The door opened. Inside, walls of screens flickered to Terran Standard, showing Earth Alliance insignias, AI subsystem logs, and one simple countdown, 2 minutes. Vex stepped forward. Who gave you access to our tactical systems? The human looked at her. You did. When you scanned me, you gave the ship my clearance by accident. That wasn't possible. Dominion protocols didn't accept non-Dominion biometrics. But this man hadn't hacked the ship. He had rewritten its recognition priorities using embedded fallback code planted in the system long before the war. Earth's last Black Ops division hadn't just disappeared. They had left keys behind. Silent failsafes buried in systems the Dominion thought they had conquered. Dust was the key. Rex finally made his way into the room. His voice was quieter now, controlled not by authority but by fear of what he was beginning to understand. Why are you doing this? The human's reply was calm. Because someone has to remind you that silence does not mean absence. You thought Earth fell. You mistook quiet for defeat. This ship is a symbol. A message. You put me in a cage and gave me a microphone. The final 10 seconds of the countdown echoed across every deck. In the brig, the lights flickered once more before going full white. The other prisoners, the ones Dominion officers had forgotten in their scramble to dissect the human anomaly, began to stir. Cells opened. Not with force. With invitation. Each cell's internal display read the same phrase, unshackled by protocol dust. You are not forgotten. Elsewhere, across dozens of sectors, similar pings began triggering. Dormant beacons that had been written off as interstellar debris lit up. Stealth satellites activated. A silent network long believed extinct awoke in pieces. Earth's silence had been tactical. And its operatives had never truly disappeared. They had simply waited. On board, Dust, or whatever his real name was, walked past the Dominion officers now frozen in place. The ship's systems recognized him as the highest-ranking authority. He didn't need weapons. He was one. He passed the brig and paused only once, glancing through the clear wall of an observation chamber where a young alien technician sat crying. The technician hadn't insulted him. Hadn't mocked. He had only watched, curious, asking questions the others didn't want answered. Dust met his eyes, then nodded once. A silent pardon. Then he walked on. Vex followed again, but this time with no bluster, no taunts. She spoke cautiously, as if trying not to provoke something buried inside the man in front of her. Are you going to kill us? Dust didn't turn around. If I wanted you dead, the ship would have vented the bridge the moment you insulted my species. Then what is this? This is exposure. The ship came out of warp early. It didn't arrive at the tribunal. It arrived at the edge of a Dominion-controlled star system where surveillance traffic was thick and military patrols were heavy. The perfect audience. The ship's transponder blinked once. Then changed to Earth's standard ID codes. It began broadcasting an open signal. Not one of surrender. One of indictment. The logs, files, interrogations, and every mocking word spoken around Cell 14B were now part of the record. Streamed across public channels to every observer watching Dominion space. The officers scrambled to shut it down. They couldn't. The system no longer obeyed their inputs. The AI had fully rerouted through Earth override. Dominion citizens watched live as high-ranking officers ridiculed the prisoner, as neuroprobes failed catastrophically, as the words of Earth's silent agent dismantled the myth of Dominion's superiority in one stroke. Then the ship's external lights shut off. One final message blinked across all channels: transmission complete. Judgment transferred. Dust walked to the ship's drop bay. No guards tried to stop him. Not a soul moved. A cloaked Terran retrieval craft appeared in orbit. No weapons. No fleet. Just one vehicle, as silent and ominous as the man they had caged. The boarding bay opened. Dust stepped inside without a word. Before it sealed, he looked back one final time. The bridge crew stared at him through internal feed. He gave them a single nod, not of triumph, but of warning. Never mistake silence for surrender. Then he vanished. The craft turned and blinked out of existence, disappearing into a cloaked corridor that had likely existed beneath Dominion sensors for years. The warship now sat in space, stripped of control, reputation, and narrative. And somewhere in the darkness between systems, Dust was already en route to the next forgotten signal. Because Earth had many ghosts. And some didn't need noise to wage war. The Dominion warship floated in silence, not from system failure but from something worse: irrelevance. Every active signal had been broadcast. Every officer's face was now part of a permanent record. And no amount of digital scrubbing or political posturing could erase what had been streamed across public and military channels. The image of Dust stepping off the interrogation deck, calm and wordless, was already being replayed on independent outposts and border colonies. Not with fear. With awe. The Dominion had captured something they never understood and accidentally turned him into a legend. Inside the ship, command systems began rebooting under limited function. The AI, now reverted to a neutral state, offered basic navigation control but refused any security overrides. The warship was allowed to move. Nothing more. Not even internal doors would open without consensus from the crew. It was as though the ship itself was punishing them for arrogance. The officers who had laughed, joked, and dismissed the human as nothing more than an artifact, were now trapped in a floating monument to their own misjudgment. Vex remained in the tactical core, staring at the console that once obeyed her without hesitation. Her hands were clasped behind her back, face unreadable. But her silence wasn't dust silence. Hers was a storm without lightning, the kind that came after the damage was already done. A technician approached cautiously, holding a report on system restoration, but paused when he saw her expression and thought better of interrupting. She didn't acknowledge him. In the lower decks, the guards who had mocked Dust had gone quiet. Not one of them stood near cell 14B, now permanently opened and offline. The room had no occupant, no sign of physical damage, and yet it felt like the air still hummed with something residual. None of them wanted to be the first to walk in. One claimed he heard a faint pulse when he passed the cell wall. Another swore the lights dimmed for a fraction of a second when he said the name Dust out loud. Nobody tested it twice. Commander Rex was holding a private transmission with Dominion High Command, or at least trying to. Most of the call consisted of static, delays, and curt demands. What did he say to them? That the most secured ship in the outer quadrant had been compromised from within? That a prisoner with no known rank or record had rewritten their systems with a glance? That Earth, which had supposedly lost its last strategic program decades ago, had just demonstrated the most elegant technological coup in modern history? There was no language in Dominion protocol for admitting defeat without a single shot fired. The retrieval craft that had taken Dust disappeared into deep space after making a single hyperspace jump. All tracking methods failed. There was no trail, no signal, no ion residue. As if the ship had peeled itself out of reality, and left behind only a shadow. But the damage was already done. The transmission logs were real. Dominion citizens across dozens of systems were already questioning their security, their superiority, and most dangerously, their perception of Earth. It was in a neutral listening post orbiting the gas giant Vorthen that the first unofficial response came through. A broadcast, clearly scrambled and delayed, replayed the moment Dust looked into the security feed and said the word proceed. The post technicians rewound the footage 3 times. They noted how he hadn't smiled. How he hadn't raised his voice. How he didn't even blink. And yet, those 8 letters had overridden a warship. 3 hours later, someone altered the Dominion flag in that outpost's digital signature. Not in protest, but in caution. It now included a small Earth Alliance watermark in the corner. Just a whisper, like a message to anyone watching that neutrality could also mean survival. Back on the Dominion ship, Vex finally broke her silence. She walked into the now darkened security chamber where the briefcase had once been locked away. It was gone, of course. Taken when Dust left. But something else was waiting in its place. A data shard. Unmarked, ordinary, blinking with soft blue light. No guards had seen who placed it there. Surveillance was still offline when it appeared. But everyone knew what it meant. She picked it up and walked it to the central archive room. Alone. She inserted the shard into a private console with no connection to the Dominion's mainframe. It loaded instantly. No decryption needed. No firewall hesitation. Just one file. A short video, time-stamped 1 hour before Dust boarded the retrieval craft. In the footage, he stood alone in the hallway outside the interrogation room. The camera caught his profile. He spoke calmly. They asked for war. We offered silence. They built walls. We mapped tunnels. They erased us. We memorized every word. You think we were sleeping? We were watching. The video ended. Vex didn't move. She stood there long after the screen faded to black, gripping the edge of the console as if it were the only solid thing left. Behind her, the hum of Dominion systems flickered, weak and fractured. And far away, somewhere in a quadrant not marked on any official star chart, Dust walked through a narrow metallic corridor aboard the stealth vessel that had extracted him. The crew said nothing to him. They didn't need to. These were not regular soldiers. These were ghosts like him. Silent. Obedient to no empire. Loyal to a protocol older than most of the stars they passed. At the front of the vessel, a hologram flickered on. It showed a list of flag systems. Dominion red zones. Places where Earth agents had been imprisoned, lost, or buried under diplomatic denial. The list scrolled. One by one, the sectors lit up. Gus raised his hand and pointed to a name halfway down the list. No words. Just a nod. The ship altered course. Somewhere in the shadows of galactic space, the silent war resumed. Earth had never stopped fighting. It had simply waited. And now, the ghosts were walking again.